I think we can get started. So, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So today we have an exciting night for everybody. We are reintroducing back our memory lane segment, and we have cross-site scripting talk for you tonight. Cross-site scripting, surprisingly, was our first ever talk for ISS sessions before any of our times. Maybe not Rick, but um, we're excited to bring to you that segment as well. And then later on in the evening, we also have Dave, who will be talking about Windows security. Dave is from Microsoft, so we are welcoming him with open arms. Before we do get started, I do also want to make a quick announcement with regards to the CCR. If anyone is listening and is still wondering what's happening with that, so this session will actually be the last session that will be counted for the CCR, just because there is a cutoff for when we can actually have the records submitted uh, for inclusion into the formal system. There still has to be some sort of validation process. Will Nick, who is our program coordinator, still has to have some time to finalize that. So the deadline will be August 7th. I will be sending out an announcement with more detail with regards to the deadline and what you need to do. We did have a talk earlier on just before the summer. I believe it was April, with regards to what needs to be done. So in my announcement, what I'll do is I'll send out a link to also the video that we have with the instructions of what to do and sort of what's needed with regards to that application process. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out probably within the next few days, um, along with a recount of the hours that we've accumulated over that time. Um, Other than that, we'll get started with the news segment presented by Hashir ChiLin. Jem unfortunately wasn't able to make it tonight, so I'll be filling in for that. And so without further ado, I will start off the news segment. All right, so for the first one, we have an article by NBC News, the too many cyber attacks, not enough cyber ninjas. So it turns out that the CTO of Mandiant, Charles Carmichael, says that he's been getting too much business. Even before the Casey hacks, which infected over 1,500 organizations, Carmel says that they are barely keeping up with the demand. This resulted in Carmichael and similar organizations having to actually turn down clients reaching out to them because they simply don't have capacity to help them. This has been presented to President Joe Biden, who has met with Vladimir Putin to discuss the issues of many ransomware, because a lot of the attacks are coming from Russia or former Soviet Union. Um, which led to and this conversation or discussion really led to a drop in attacks, but it only lasted for 2 weeks, and there has been again another explosion in the number of attacks that's been happening. The Casey attack mentioned earlier was carried out by ransomware gang R Evil, who asked for 70 million lump sum because they couldn't keep up with the number of infected computers. So that 70 million lump sum was to unlock all the effective computers that were a victim of the ransomware attacks. The CTO of BreachQuest, Jake Williams, says he's being selective on the cases he's also working on, stating that he's in a position where he's choosing what to work on and what he's interested in on that day. Sucks for companies. Um,
By thread post. It is about a very old vulnerability found on HP printer drivers. So researchers have released details about this privilege escalation vulnerability that can impact millions of Windows machines. This vulnerability is also found on Samsung and Xerox. So about this vulnerability, it exists in a function in the driver that accepts data sent from user mode via input and output. Essentially, this allows attackers to overrun the buffer used by the driver. So unprivileged users can elevate themselves into a system account, allowing them to run code in a kernel mode. So the bug has lurked in systems for 16 years, and it carries out an 8.8 out of 10 on the CVSS scale. If exploited, the cyber attackers could bypass security products, install programs, view, change, encrypt, or delete data, or create new accounts with more extensive use rights. So yeah, 16 years, pretty big vulnerability. Not a big surprise, I guess.
So the news is from the thread post, and the news topic is Windows Hello bypass fools biometric safeguard in PCs. It is a new discovered Microsoft Windows 10 vulnerability. The password-free authentication system in Microsoft Windows 10 has been uncovered that it could allow an attacker to spoof an image of a person's face to trick the facial recognition system and take control of a device. To be more specific, the vulnerability is on Windows Hello feature. So Windows Hello feature is a Windows 10 feature that allows users to authenticate themselves without a password. Instead, user can use PIN code or biometric identity such as fingerprint or facial recognition. To exploit the vulnerability, the attacker needs three things. First, it requires an attacker to have physical access to a device. Second, the attacker has to capture or recreate a photo of the target's face. Third, the image has to be put in a custom-made USB. Then the attacker can plug the USB to the device to inject the spoof image to the authenticating host. The exploitation of the bypass can extend beyond Windows Hello system to any authentication system and allow a pluggable third-party USB camera to act as a biometric sensor. Researchers have no evidence that anyone has tried or used the attack in the wild, but someone with motive could potentially use it on the target victim. So this news emphasizes the importance of physical security on protecting our devices.
Right, so the next one is about Facebook and Facebook employees' abuse of user data. One Facebook engineer was found to abuse employee access to user data to track down a woman who left him after they fought while on vacation. This led to the employee to find the exact hotel that the woman went to. After digging up information on the female whom he had gone on a date with, once the woman stopped responding to this message, he started digging up through the years of private conversations that she had with her friends over Facebook Messenger. When needed, he even had access to her location in real time. Access to this data was provided to employees in order to cut away the red tape that slowed down engineers. That was sort of Facebook's rationale as to why employees had ability to look up users' information. Most breaches were found to be actually male employees who looked up Facebook profiles of women that they were interested in. In 2015, a presentation to Zuckerberg at the company's top executive level stated that engineers had abused the data access nearly every month. However, it was found that sort of Zuckerberg's priority was not necessarily, even though Facebook says we're trying to be secure, doesn't seem like that's actually their priority. Between 2014 and 2015, 52 employees had been fired for exploiting user data for personal means. Zuckerberg has been proposed the idea that would bring the number of employees who have access to such data down to fewer than 5,000 from more than what was previously, which was about 16,000 who had access as of 2015. But these ideas were met with pushback from the executive. So this is sort of why we say, even though Facebook says publicly that they are trying their best to protect user data, doesn't seem at this point at face value that that's sort of the case.
So our next article is, well, it goes over a study that was conducted about the cyber attacks on the game industry. So the report shows us that cyber attacks on the video game industry skyrocketed, shooting up to like 340% in 2020. And, you know, the gaming industry suffered more than 240 million web attacks in 2020, representing 4% of the total 6.3 billion web attacks in 2020. In fact, the year-over-year change globally for the year-over-year change globally for web application attacks was only 2%, meaning that gaming saw more growth in attacks than any other industry in 2020. So the threat actors are interested in abusing these gamers, well, and the game industries as well. And because the actual game industry is rising in many different ways, it raises the risk and, well, reward in so many different ways. So yeah, it's still relevant today.
Okay, continue to the gaming topic. So this news is about data collection on gaming. So personally, playing video game is part of my life, so I find out this news is interesting. It is a new research that reveals how personal and financial data collected by game giants can become a privacy disaster for unsuspected gamers. It is no secret that gaming companies have been collecting user data in order to help them make better games for the future and improve the existing experience as well. This is made easier by games being connected to the internet, as the data can be sent back to the developer in real time. The data itself comprises a range of parameters depending upon the game, including the in-game action taken by user, in relation to their frequency, choice, accuracy, physical location, voice, and other gesture employed, hardware and software being used, personal data such as their contact information and contact list. Using all of this information, data analysts can help companies and other groups with access to the data deduce a person's real identity, age, habit, preference, and gender, even when the end user may not have chosen to reveal this information. But this is not all. Data collection can also help companies find out about the user's purchasing habits and financial status based on the console they are using, their purchasing habit within the game, and what type of resource they seem to rely on when playing. To conclude, we need to hold gaming companies and console manufacturers more accountable for the data they collect about their user and ultimately how this data is being used, just as we expect social media sites and other business to have answers.
And so for the next article, it is about the global abuse of cyber surveillance weapon Pegasus. So Israel surveillance company NSO Group's Pegasus software is being used to target more than just criminals and terrorists. There is evidence to show that human rights activists and journalists and lawyers across the world have also been targeted. If you didn't know, Pegasus can be installed on a phone through SMS, WhatsApp, iMessage, or unknown vulnerabilities. Once it's there, it can harvest data from SMS, emails, WhatsApp chat, photos, videos, activate the device's microphone or camera, record calls, gather GPS data, export calendar, and contact books. Of particular surprise, the article also mentions that the latest advances in NSO's technology enables it to penetrate phones with zero-click attacks, meaning a user does not even need to click on a malicious link for their phone to be infected. In a recent data leak, it was revealed that more than 50,000 phone numbers are currently of interest to clients of the NSO since 2016. Although a number having their number simply doesn't mean, so although the number might be on the list, doesn't necessarily mean that the device itself had been affected with Pegasus, but it's indicative of a potential failure of surveillance. Identities of the people whose numbers were on this list include business executives, religious figures, academics, NGO employees, union officials, cabinet members, presidents, and even prime ministers. There's also, in the article, it also mentions there was a case where um, uh, uh, a country leader's family was actually part whose number was found in the list, which kind of raises suspicions that the leader is even sort of spying on their family members. So more than 180 journalists are also included, including reporters, editors, executives at CNN, the New York Times, the Financial Times, among many other journalists or media outlets. Of note, there is actually a case where there was a freelance reporter, Cecilia Penida Burrito, who was murdered recently when his killers were able to locate him at a car wash. But it's undecided if there's actually a link between the two. NSO maintains that it does not operate the system that it sells its products to, so it does not have any access to any of the data that their customers actually target. The NSO claims that it only sells to the military, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies, and have said that there's 40 unnamed countries that they've actually sold their product to. And they also claim that their customers get vetted rigorously through ensuring that they have spotless human rights records before any product gets sold to them. However, when actually, asked to make a statement about the customers and the details of that, the NSO declined to give any specific details about their customers and any of the people that they sort of target.
So our next story is about an analysis made on a social media app known as Telegram, and where 4 cryptographic vulnerabilities were found. So this poses a big risk considering that Telegram already has over 400 million active users. So the main one allows attackers to manipulate the sequence of messages from a client to a cloud server. The second flaw makes it possible for attackers to see what messages are encrypted by client or server. The third and fourth are less likely to be exploited, but still worth noting. One of them targeting key negotiation between the client and the server, and other where an attacker can recover plain text from encrypted messages. So it's a handful of issues and concerns, and it's kind of a bigger deal since it's an encrypted texting app.
Yeah, so this news is about new Windows and Linux flaws give attackers higher system privilege. So Microsoft Windows 10 and the upcoming Windows 11 versions have been found vulnerable to a new local privilege escalation vulnerability. It permits users with low-level permission access Windows system files and enable them to unmask the operating system installation password and even decrypt private keys. The vulnerability has been nicknamed as Serious SAM. This vulnerability exists because of overly permissive access control lists on multiple system files, including the Security Account Manager database, aka SAM database. This is where the nicknames come from. As we all know what admin privilege can do, an attacker who successfully exploits this vulnerability could run arbitrary code with system privilege, install programs, view, change, or delete data, or create new account with full user rights. And on the Linux side, old Linux kernel version from 2014 that can be exploited by malicious users and malware already deployed on the system to get root level privileges. The vulnerability affects default installation of Ubuntu 20.04 2010 21.04, Debian 11, and FedOps 34 workstations. To be more technical, the flow concerned a size T to int type conversion vulnerability in one of the Linux kernel files file system interface, permitting an unprivileged local attacker to create, mount, and delete a deep directory structure whose total path length exceeds 1 GB, resulting in privilege escalation on the vulnerable host. And that are the vulnerabilities on Windows and Linux mentioned in this news.
Awesome. So that sort of concludes our news roundup. So next up, we're going to have our memory lane segment presented by Christian, Pablo, and Jackson. As I said before, our topic today is cross-site scripting, and that was actually our first ever our first ever ISSessions talk over, I believe it was like over 8 years ago. What I'll do, I'll pass the mic over to Christian, Pablo, and Jackson. Let me just stream.
Yeah, so just swap over to Nash's stream real quick.
Jack is actually restreaming it, so it actually doesn't matter.
Oh, he is? Oh my, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. On Jack's, I still see the up next memory lane.
Oh, he had it there a second ago. Maybe he moved it. There we go.
Perfect. There it is. Awesome. Thank you, Nash, for the great introduction. Hey guys. My name is Pablo. I'll be one of the persons talking about the memory lane. I'm also followed by another content creator and another exec member, Christian and Jackson. Huge shout out to the last year exec team for kind of helping us out throughout the memory lane part. And the topic we chose to talk about for the memory lane would be the cross-site scripting. And then Christian will tell you more about what is memory lane.
Thank you, Pablo. So you might be asking, what is memory lane? Memory lane is one of the many segments we host on our ISSessions streams. In particular, memory lane has us talk about a topic in InfoSec world and analyze it down to the timeline of major events, along with thorough technical explanations. This week, we will be discussing the history of cross-site scripting and its major events. To begin, here's a quick explanation of what cross-site scripting is.
Okay, so first, what is cross-site scripting? So cross-site scripting is a vulnerability and type of attack which exploits a common flaw in the system. It is the most common vulnerability discovered since 2014 and was in the top 3 most common vulnerabilities of 2019. These attacks use a type of injection to implant malicious scripts in otherwise innocent websites. So attackers can then exploit cross-site scripting by crafting and forwarding a script to a client where it won't be authenticated or checked for malicious code. So they have to kind of send it to a specific spot where it won't be checked. And these scripts can then gain access to stuff like cookies, session tokens, and other important information. And sometimes they can also rewrite the HTML page. And there are 3 main types of cross-site scripting. So the first one is called reflected. So in a reflected cross-site scripting attack, the malicious script is injected into an HTTP request. So they manipulate the input variable of the request to contain the malicious script instead of the normal desired value. So if normally you'd send a number or a word or a username or whatever, instead you would send this script. And then when the response is sent to the browser, the script runs and does whatever malicious thing they want it to. So here's a quick example. So first, the perpetrator discovers a website that has a vulnerability that enables a script to be injected. Then they inject the website with a malicious script that in this case steals each visitor's session cookies. So then we go into the victim. And so for each visit to the website, whenever the response triggers, the HTTP response triggers, the malicious script is activated. And then in this case, the session cookie would be sent to the perpetrator.
The next cross-site scripting attack we'll be talking about is stored XSS. Also sometimes known as persistent cross-site scripting, it is often known for being one of the most dangerous kinds of cross-site scripting vulnerability. Stored cross-site scripting differs from other forms of cross-site scripting, thanks to the fact that it occurs when malicious code is injected into the target site. This action creates persistence, hence its nickname, which leads to subsequent users being affected by the attack, as all the following users will have the script loaded onto their browsers automatically. In the diagram below, we begin with what is expected, a normal case scenario. Let's say the end user Bob is using an image search web application. Using this application, whenever Bob searches for images of cats, the server does what it's expected to and gives the user pictures of cats. However, one day, a malicious actor notices a flaw with the server that allows them to inject stored cross-site scripting code. When this malicious actor injects the specialized script into the web application, it stays within the server until it is removed manually. As a result, all subsequent users are affected until it is dealt with. The next day, Bob uses the web application to search for pictures of dogs this time. When he opens the web application, it works as expected, but also has an unexpected element into it where it loads the injected code. As a result, the attacker is able to execute actions depending on what the script was coded to do. For example, let's say the script was designed to be a session hijack. He would now have access to Bob's credentials and execute the payload upon opening.
Awesome. And then the final one that Jackson mentioned would be DOM-based XSS, also known as Document Object Model, or a fancy way of saying the environment. This attack usually modifies the browser side without them knowing, and this attack isn't like reflected or stored where the attack is on the response page. So on the next slide, there'll be a diagram, and I'll pretty much walk you through what the diagram talks about. So with DOM-based cross-site scripting, the attacker creates a fake URL that makes it look like a legit URL, and that's where the user clicks. This URL is either given to the user or is found on a site. Once that user clicks that URL, it sends them to a secure website that they think the website receives the request, but does not include the malicious string in the response. This is now in part 4, where the user's browser executes the legitimate script inside the response, causing the malicious script to insert the page. This is typically done on a website's checkout page or on a website's cart page when people enter their credit card information when they want to buy something. From then, the user's browser executes the malicious script inserted into the page by the client-side code. Typically, the client throughout the entire experience does not recognize what's going on because the website is working to what they think is proper. And then finally, once that script is triggered by usually clicking submit or confirm payment, all that user's sensitive info is then sent to the attacker's side. Next, we will talk about our great timeline of XSS.
Thank you, Pablo. As mentioned earlier, this will be our timeline. Within our timeline, we will be speaking of 5 major events. Starting in 1999, we have the birth of cross-site scripting, followed by the infamous worm called Sammy, who plagued MySpace in 2005, followed by 5 years later with the Apache breach of 2010, then followed by TweetDeck and the self-retweeting tweet, and at the end for 2018, we'll talk about British Airways breach. So beginning with the birth of XSS in 1999. It was originally observed in 1999 by Microsoft engineers. They found something really weird with a lot of site data that they were gathering. Normally, when you expect traffic from a web application, you expect what you coded into it. Unfortunately, a lot of these scripts had weird mismatched script tags on it, which is extremely unusual. Upon further investigation, they found that these mismatched script tags resulted in browsers executing malicious code, which was executed upon further user actions such as submitting a form or clicking a radio button. 1 year later, they came up with their findings and had disclosed the fact that these attacks were now called cross-site scripting attacks because of the fact that users were putting in other site code or other code from from scripts that were made on the fly and using them to attack users. In particular, the attack that was created was called a reflected cross-site scripting attack, marking the very first event of a cross-site scripting attack in general.
Okay, so next is the Sammy attack on MySpace. So this is this happened on MySpace in 2005, and it was named after the attacker, who is Sammy Kamkar, who's pictured there. And so this attack was kind of interesting because it wasn't actually intentional. So Sammy was browsing around his profile, and he noticed a cross-site scripting vulnerability, which then allowed him to inject worm code onto his profile. And I kind of find it funny because it feels like Sammy could have done like anything. Like he could have been malicious, he could have stolen people's data, but then he actually just made it so anyone who visited his profile would have a worm spread to them, and the worm would make them become his friend automatically, and then spread to them. Unfortunately, it kind of got a little out of his control as it kept going around and around, and it infected millions of accounts in under 24 hours. And so then I think he kind of regretted it. Like, it kind of got higher than he wanted it to be. So he tried to stop it by deleting his profile. Unfortunately, this had the side effect of causing the worm to delete all of the infected profiles, which eventually caused the site to shut down. So he just wanted some friends, but he ended up destroying MySpace.
Next up, we have the Apache breach of 2010. It started on April 9th, 2010, where the Apache project was alerted to a number of password resets on their Jira server. For those who don't know what Jira is, it's a software that's used for bug tracking, issue tracking, and project management. Pretty much when Apache was hosting this, they realized that a lot of unauthorized password changes were being made. And then, after a quick bit of investigation, they realized that this attack has been occurring since April 5th, 2010. They had to act quickly, as the attackers had privileged Jira accounts, and most notably, had rooted access to brutus.apache.org. This machine hosted critical services to the project such as Jira, Confluence, and Bugzilla. The attackers also accessed the main Apache shell server, people.apache.org, also known as the main Apache page, but were unable to escalate privileges. So the Apache project is big, like very big. We all know what it is. Anyone who's worked with HTTP or HTTPS is pretty familiar with it. So how could this happen? The attack started when a slice host server was compromised by the attackers. Since it had a Jira page on it, what the attackers had done is they had actually exploited a vulnerability that was previously unknown, and it created a cross-site scripting attack in it, where whenever someone clicked it, it would steal sessions. And then what they did furthermore is that they used tinyURL, a URL shortener, to obfuscate a special link that they made that took advantage of the cross-site scripting vulnerability. Because of the fact that they obfuscated it, whenever they sent it out to all the other users, so in context of what the other users were, this was the Apache team. Someone reported an issue, or at least they plagued or made a fake issue, and then they try to get administrators to click it. Unfortunately, administrators fell for this, and they clicked the tinyURL link that they didn't think was suspicious at all. They thought it was just a user reporting a bug tracking issue. Unfortunately, as it was not intended to be an issue, but rather a way to steal sessions, the script stole the administrator session cookie, to which they then accessed even further. Now that the attacker has stolen a valid administrator session, they now have a privileged account where they can perform the actions they intended. So, following this the session hijack, this is where they started escalating privileges throughout the servers. Once the privileged Jira accounts were compromised, the attackers disabled notifications for the project to avoid alerting other Apache members of any changes that have been made to the project. This was crucial because there were several changes that would have alerted the attack much earlier, such as uploading JSP files that had backdoors or copying the user's home directories and their files. On April 9th, The attackers uploaded a jar file that could collect passwords and sent a fabricated email from Jira telling the Apache team to reset their passwords because of a Java vulnerability. One of those who reset their passwords used the same password for brutus.apache.org, which also had sudo access to the server. With that sudo access, they were then able to root brutus.apache.org and set their sites to a new target, people.apache.org. The attackers found cached credentials on the Brutus server, which were then used to log on to people.apache.org, but had unprivileged access. They kept trying to escalate their privileges, but were never successful, so in a last-ditch attempt, they started to reset passwords, which unfortunately for the attackers led to them being discovered. The Apache team alerted Atlassian, the Jira team, and SliceHost of the attack and the cross-site scripting vulnerability. Atlassian responded to it, and they quickly took actions to prevent it, but however, the compromised SliceHost didn't. They eventually led to the compromised SliceHost attacking Atlassian. On April 10th, Jira and Bugzilla went back online after being moved to thor.apache.org. And on April 13th, Atlassian patched the cross-site scripting vulnerability in the Jira software.
Awesome. So now it is 2014. The World Cup has just ended. Germany won. Banging year. But another banging year for Twitter as the TweetDeck or the self-retweeting tweet. Pretty much on June 11th, 2014, a Twitter user by the @handler that I'm not gonna try to pronounce that tweeted the following. And if you're in the program and you've taken Java 1 or Java 2, you would see that this script kind of looks familiar to simple JavaScript code or HTML code with the brackets or the greater sign script and then closing with the script at the end. Pretty much what this code does, uh, it's a self-retweeting tweet. So uh, there is no filter to make sure that the tweet will not seem as code. So on the left side, you can see that Twitter's interpretation of the tweet is in quotes. So if you see how it's a little green, it's a little like different colored. It's in quotes. So therefore, Twitter interpreted the code as a string. Therefore, it should not trigger anything. But with Twitter's TweetDeck, it interpreted the tweet as an actual command, as an actual script. As you can see on the right side, how there's no quotes because the tweet did not incorporate any of the tags in the screenshot. So the tag here would be the script. Pretty much the script ran and the tweet was self-retweeting, so not manually by the user continuing to click retweet, but just by the bot constantly retweeting it. Pretty much the aftermath of this tweet, it was kind of funny. A lot of people were making jokes at Twitter at the time. This tweet actually got around 65,000 retweets to this day. It's still unknown of how many are from the actual tweet deck and how many are actually from like Twitter users out there. So far there's currently no evidence that suggests this vulnerability was an exploit, was exploited to be maliciously. Pretty much Twitter took it down after they realized that programmers that have a little bit of experience could abuse this and retweet their own tweet over 1,000 times. So Twitter took down the tweet deck temporarily to fix this issue. And next we're going to go on to our British Airways.
Yes, so British Airways, as you can imagine, is a British airline. And they announced that they had a breach between August 21st and September 5th of 2018. So the breach affected almost 400,000 customers, and it leaked their personal and payment information, but there was no passport information leaked. So British Airways then made an article explaining the details of the incident and answered some questions for the clients and customers. They explained that payments through the website and the mobile app were affected. Afterwards, they were hit with a $230 million fine due to the fact that when clients would go to pay with their credit card, all of their stored information was in clear text. So if there was a breach, the hackers could just see it. They wouldn't have to decode it or de-encrypt it or anything. It was just basically free. So this was a pretty bad error for them, or bad oversight. So as we described earlier, this type of attack was focused on the payment page, and from there a script was injected that affected both the website and the app. And all of this was caused by a hacker group called MageCart that had a long string of attacks in the same year, other than the British Airways. And that's what we're going to talk about next.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackson. So yeah, like Jackson said, MageCart is a hacker group that has been known for multiple attacks. The 3 attacks I will describe briefly, not too crazy, is one of them being Ticketmaster UK, Newegg, and Top Sports Collection. So starting with Ticketmaster, just a quick rundown. Ticketmaster is a website where people go buy tickets for different events in order to confirm their purchase. But in order for them to do that, they have to pay online through their credit card information system. So this is where MageCart attack. Ticketmaster's breach impacted over like 9.5 million customers across Europe because it is very worldwide known. The breach occurred for months before in February, but wasn't shut down until June 23rd of 2018. Ticketmaster received a huge fine of 1.25 million euros, violating the GDPR. Pretty much, Ticketmaster allegedly failed to put appropriate security measures in place to prevent security attacks on the chatbot installed on the online payment. The crazy thing is, was that Ticketmaster was notified by several different financial institutions about this breach, but they failed to identify the problem and they left the bot on its payment page for 9 weeks after the first alert. The second attack is another big attack would be Newegg, which happened on August 13th of September, or from August 13th till September. When when the attack started, it was a malicious script. Oh my bad, sorry. They created a fake domain to replicate Newegg's original domain. So the domain they created was neweggsstats.com, and the URL that Newegg uses is newegg.com. So as you can see, there's a little bit of similarities, but yet still not the same URL. So some users, when they typed in neweggstats.com, would be taken to the malicious script. Unfortunately, the exact number of people affected by the Newegg attack is still yet unknown, but it is expected to be a large number. The way Newegg worked, it was a skimmer code that collected skimmed credit cards information, similar to the British Airway. And finally, Top Sports Collection is a trading card or collectible company that was also hit by the hacker group called MageCart. When they start to inject the malicious script into the checkout page so clients would click confirm on the card, is how it worked. So when you click confirm or add credit card information, that is when you would trigger the script that then would send all your personal information to the attacker's remote server. Upon further review, TopSport was first aware of this attack on December 26, 2018, but after more investigation, it was later discovered that this script has actually been running since November 19th, 2018, all the way till January 9th, 2019. So it's quite a long time for this script to be running on this popular British Top Sports collecting cards. Top Sports did confirm that customers' information was leaked by the attackers. They did let their customers know about it. A lot of people were upset. Later, TopSport did eventually upgrade their software system to prevent attacks like this to happen in the future. And finally, that's it that we wrote down for our attacks. It's been a crazy almost 20 years, and yet there's still more attacks to be happening. A lot of attacks are still out there that need to be documented. And yeah, to be continued, really. The world is still growing.
Yep. I just wanted to add that we found that there were lots of vulnerabilities found since 2018, but they weren't necessarily acted on, so they didn't become an attack. And last but not least, we gave some follow-up info. So here is a cross-site scripting prevention cheat sheet that includes examples and other awesome info. We'll post it afterwards, but here's just some pretty basic tips. So to prevent cross-site scripting attacks. So first, never allow the insertion of untrusted data except in allowed locations. So make sure that if you're inserting data, it's either trusted or it's being authenticated and checked as it's being inserted. Also, another one is to use one of many types of encoding. So HTML, JavaScript, and attribute encoding are all different types it mentioned. It says to avoid JavaScript URLs because when you click on a JavaScript URL, it runs code. It can run code, and that code could be malicious and could affect you without you knowing. Also, you should turn off HTTP trace because an attacker can steal cookie data using JavaScript when an HTTP trace is called. There are all our references that we used.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Christian, Pablo, and Jackson. I think that was actually very, very educational. I had not known a lot of, the things that you guys talked about. So thanks for all the research that you've done. Right, so what we'll do is we will take a break. We'll reconvene at around 8 o'clock for our next segment. The CCR code will be posted on the slide, I believe. Jack, if you can switch slides to the break one. Perfect, here's the code, and I will post the CCR link.
Come on, video too. The kids are in bed, so I'm not worried about somebody showed up behind me.
Just have a little kid run across the screen like, hey, I think you got a little kid run. It's like, what?
Oh, it's been a wild 18 months with everybody on Teams and video calls. Yeah. Yeah, Discord apparently doesn't have background blur unless I missed it somewhere.
No, only Zoom that we know of.
Awesome. So, are we ready to get started, or
Just give us another minute or so.
no problem?
Yeah, just quickly, I would see the Space Jam movie. I think it looks great. I'm ready to see LeBron.
Yeah, now I think we're good to go.
Great.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us again. So today or tonight we have, how do you say your last name, David?
Kozera.
Kozera. Yeah, we have David Kozera from Microsoft, who is going to be giving a talk on Windows Defender. David is the Microsoft 365 um, uh, education lead. He joined the company in 2016, coming from public education system in Ontario, bringing with him much experience with the Microsoft technology. He has deep understanding of Office 365, Azure, Microsoft 365 Defender, Windows application virtualization, and much more. Today, his talk is going to be on Windows Defender to Active Directory versus Azure Active Directory. And David will also be talking about various topics of one of the most important components of the InfoSec world, Windows security. So thank you for David for joining us tonight. It is definitely a privilege to have you. So you can take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Love doing these sort of sessions. Would much prefer to do it in person, hopefully at some point soon. I'm tentatively traveling, I think next month, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm hoping I've got tons of slides and I could talk for hours. That's my whole job, but I'm hoping to have more of a conversation tonight than me just talk for an hour. Yeah, I've been in education, IT, for forever. I worked at my kid's school board for many years, from a technician up to infrastructure manager, and then worked for the Educational Computing Network of Ontario for a few years, both as a shared systems analyst and then leading that team as the project manager. And then joined Microsoft as their national technology strategist for EDU, and just last October took over the Microsoft 365 portfolio. So yeah, it's everything from Office 365 to Azure AD to M365 Defender kind of falls in my purview. I thought we'd start, and let me click through on these slides here. I thought I'd give us a quick intro section, to Microsoft and security. This is a $10 billion business for Microsoft. Yearly now, we invest $1 billion a year in security research and development, not including acquisitions. We've bought 4 security companies in the last few months. I think Risk IQ was one of the links that you'd posted there. We acquired them 2 months ago. So we are not exiting the security business. We're doubling down on security. So we'll talk about the intelligence security graph, what Microsoft Security Intelligence, and give you a quick overview of the landscape from my perspective, and then we're going to quickly drill down into Windows security capabilities. And then if we've still got time, we'll talk identity, Azure AD, and Active Directory. And then feel free to interrupt me, or I'm in the stream questions chat as well if you want to type out questions.
Awesome. I was just going to actually mention that too.
So first things first, if you haven't heard of the intelligent security graph, that is all of the security signals that Microsoft consumes, daily from all of our properties. So whether it's Windows and Office 365, Azure, and Xbox, etc., that's 6.5 trillion signals a day now. So massive amounts of data and signaling. This number's like continuing to rise exponentially, which has been fascinating to watch at my time at Microsoft. What I'd like to actually jump to really quick is, how we expose some of this data externally then. So if you're not familiar with Microsoft Security Intelligence, this is our website for our security teams. We'll post our latest news, communities and support. You can submit, files and malicious URLs. Obviously, if you're an enterprise customer, we're going to be prioritizing those sort of submissions and analyzing them more quickly. But anybody can submit those URLs or files. But I'd like to click on threats here just to show you kind of what we're dealing with globally. So this is from a device perspective, and Canada is this tiny little bubble. So we are a drop in the bucket. But when you actually pivot down, I click on Canada and then pivot down, this is where our education landscape sits. That's pretty much the same across the planet. And ever since I've been looking at this website, education's been sitting at about 60%. So EDU is one of the largest targets, frankly. So shoring up our colleges, universities, K-12 institutions is super important. I'll make sure everybody has these links at the end as well. So a bit of an intro. So Microsoft really has two huge product categories when it comes to security. One is Azure Sentinel. That's our cloud native SIEM. It runs in Azure. You can't get Sentinel on-prem. It's consuming a phenomenal amount of data every second at this point. And then underneath that is Microsoft Defender, which is our XDR, Extended Detection and Response. If I start using acronyms that people don't know of, just ask me in chat or let me know. I'm not sure kind of what level people are at from an industry terms perspective. And then, Azure Sentinel can plug into other clouds. We're not just about protecting Microsoft assets. And then partnerships. So the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association has hundreds of partners in it that we provide deep API access into our security ecosystem. So Sentinel is cloud native, like I said. We will consume any data into that product in the cloud. It's got machine learning, AI capabilities built in. You can build your own models as well, and then it's all about automation. So playbooks, right? When X happens, do Y, right? When you see this attack, go block a port on the firewall or an IP address, or disable a user account, or force a self-service password reset, or whatever those flows might be. Underneath that is the XDR product, right? So identities, devices, data, infrastructure, apps, and network. These are carved into two pieces, though. The first one is Microsoft 365 Defender. So we're going down another layer here. That's Azure Active Directory and identity layer. That's endpoints, which we'll drill into here in a minute, right? Not just Windows endpoints, but across, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, Android. Applications, whether they're cloud native SaaS, or on-premises apps that we expose through Azure App Proxy, for example. Email, cloud documents, all of that. And then on the right-hand side, which I won't go into today, is infrastructure, really, right? Databases, virtual machines running in Azure or other clouds or on premises, container security, network security, firewalls. We bought an IoT security company a couple weeks back. IoT security is super important. A few years ago now, does anybody remember I think it was at a higher ed in US, figuring out that some of their pop machines with Bluetooth were able to be compromised? That sort of stuff's going to become more and more important. So drilling down again, M365 Defender. So the identity piece, there's a product specifically for identity on premises called Microsoft Defender for Identity. It looks at domain controller traffic. It's like Wireshark constantly listening and looking at every piece of authentication, and then saying what users access what resources, what computers do they log into, what file shares do they talk to, what print servers are they using, right? And it doing machine learning on top of that, right? So if we see a user account logged into multiple computers across different physical environments, let's say, that's a good indicator of an account's been compromised. Or if an account's being constantly used for 36 hours, people have to sleep. Why is that account being shared? So it'll surface those sort of AI, ML detections, but also well-known attack types as well, right? Pass the hash, overpass the hash, etc. Endpoints, which we'll drill into in a second. Cloud apps. So there's a CASB product, Cloud Apps, a Cloud App Security Broker, that effectively sits between an end user and the cloud application and can make access control, policy, and governance actions, right? So maybe you're going to download a file to an endpoint that is unmanaged. Well, because that endpoint's unmanaged, the CASB could automatically encrypt that file using Microsoft Information Protection, so that we don't care if the endpoint's encrypted, the actual file itself becomes encrypted, and that travels with the document. And then at the far end, user data. So when we talk email, Teams, link sharing, spam, phishing, that's Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So drilling down one other layer, you can see there's a whole lot of pillars here, but when we talk endpoints, our EDR product is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. That is cross-platform. We're not going to talk Mac or Linux or mobile today, but we're committed to securing any endpoint. We don't care what endpoint it is. But on the Windows specific side of things, we've got security baselines, Defender antivirus just built into Windows these days. And we'll talk about Defender AV and the different layers and why it's not just signature based, and why most organizations, at least 50% of enterprise computers these days running Windows 10 are just using Defender antivirus. It's inbox and it's next generation AV. And then I won't go through this whole list here. We'll talk about each one of them in detail today. Let me look at chat here. Yeah, never would have thought education was by far number one. It's because schools have, believe it or not, lots of money because they like building buildings. They have lots of employees, and you're big and squishy for the most part, right? It's difficult to roll out things like MFA to students, especially in K-12, right? Try securing with a grade 2's identity. It's not like you can give them a phone, and you're not going to be giving them hard tokens, right? That's a difficult problem, right? So we have to engineer solutions though that are not going to weaken security of enterprise customers as well. So things like QR code plus PIN, for example, or looking at technologies like, remember Windows 8's picture password, right? Imagine translating that sort of technology to cloud. So that's the sort of stuff we have to start thinking about when it comes to EDU. And then we see schools that are, unfortunately, K-12 can be vectors into much richer targets like higher ed, right? So a school district teacher might get their account compromised, and then that account isn't used internally within the school. It's actually used to target and spearfish into a higher ed university, for example, for research data or whatever it might be. You got some competition with the slide animations. These slides are all from our marketing teams. I just get to pick and choose which ones I pick. And how do you find customers adapting different security technologies? So in my vertical in education, it's hard because for the most part, IT tends to be underfunded in schools. That's not the primary mission of a school, right? The primary mission is to educate students, make them ready for the real world, or go on from K to 12 into higher ed. So it's often a lower priority, but that's changing these days, right? That it's becoming a superintendent, director of ed, provost, vice provost level conversation when there's a ransomware issue or something and you can't educate students anymore. That's a problem. So the other thing I'd say is there's a lot of technical debt within institutions, right? A lot of history, that is a challenge to secure as well. All right. So let's drill into Windows security here. So these are the different pillars I was showing in that last slide. This deck, by the way, or this OneNote is publicly available. I try not to use slide decks anymore. I try to create a OneNote, and this is how I organize my brain, so I can go back and regurgitate useful information. But this is available for you to sync to your own OneNote client. I know lots of people use this as a reference, as well. And I'll make sure you have that by the end of the call. So we'll go through these kind of one by one and talk about the different security tech. So the first one on the list, Windows Hello for Business. I love Windows Hello. I don't even know my Microsoft password anymore, frankly. Any guesses why it's difficult to phish a Microsoft employee? Because we don't really know our passwords. Everything's passwordless. Yeah, that's how you get rid of phishing. Is you get rid of passwords, right? If we, and even if it's not 100%, right? Say an employee is at least, or student or whoever it might be, is at least enabled for passwordless technology. It makes it abnormal for them to see a password field, and they at least question that. So Microsoft is investing a lot into passwordless based technologies. Even on Windows itself, you don't need a Windows Hello capable camera with an IR sensor. You should, on your personal machine, if you're using Windows, still enable Windows Hello and just use a PIN to log in, because a PIN is tied to that device. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on an airplane before the pandemic where you could easily shoulder surf and watch somebody type the password in on their MacBook and then take that password and then attack the organization, right? With a PIN, I'd have to steal your device at that point to be able to unlock the machine. So super safe. It's considered enterprise grade 2-factor authentication. PIN and device, something I have and something I know. We can even allow for additional factors. So maybe we need to have the device, maybe we need to have a facial scan, and I need a PIN. So there's robust security built into Windows Hello. It's effectively asymmetric key pairs, right? Secured by hardware, like your TPM. Yeah. Costco samples, great point. Just wait though when your PIN becomes alphanumeric, and then your PIN is actually kind of then a password, I guess, but it's tied to just that one machine, because that's an option as well. You don't just have to use numbers. But yeah, Windows Hello is fantastic tech. The challenge we have with Windows Hello though is it doesn't roam really well, right? I've been asked, hey, Microsoft, we'd love to see you roam biometrics. Hard stop, no, right? We're not going to take your facial scan and store that in the cloud somewhere. You can reset a password, you can't reset your face or your fingerprint, right? So that data stays locally, right? So all we're doing with a facial scan with an infrared, for example, or depth detection like we'd use in the Kinect cameras, is that's effectively hashed, and that's what's used to unlock the TPM and the certificate, and that certificate is then used to provide secure access to on-premises AD or Azure Active Directory, or your local machine. Any issues with bias and facial recognition, people being able to unlock each other's accounts based on ethnicity? No, this goes back a few years ago, but I know we had identical twins being used with Windows Hello, and that wasn't an issue. What would WDYM? I'm not sure familiar with that acronym. What did you something by Rome? What did you mean by Rome? Oh, so roaming between. So if I'm a nurse in a hospital, I'm going to be logging into a whole bunch of different computers, just like a teacher or a faculty member at a school. I'm not going to, I've got my own personal machine, but what if I'm using shared computers throughout an institution? Windows Hello requires enrollment on every device, and you're not going to go through that enrollment, right? So the way we do that, though, is we don't enroll every device. We use FIDO for that, right? And FIDO keys. So now, as of I think it's 21 or 20H1 of Windows 10, you're able to use a FIDO key to sign into Windows. So walk up to a machine, pop the key in the side. Yes, there's some minimum requirements around OS version, a few other things, but type in your PIN at the lock screen, touch the sensor on the FIDO key, and the computer logs you in. And we're seeing that that's a significant benefit, as you can imagine, in healthcare scenarios where nurses need to be able to walk around between different machines constantly, and doctors. It hasn't taken off really a whole lot in education yet, but I think it will. All right. And if you don't have a FIDO key, actually, here's I was going to show you this later, but we go to portal.azure.com and sign in options at the bottom. Sign in with Windows Hello or a security key. So I could use Windows Hello in this scenario, but I will use a security key instead. I type in my PIN for my security key. I got my key mounted next to my computer here, and it's got multiple accounts on it. So I select the one that I want to use, and job done. I'm signed in without a password using certificate-based authentication. And I could drop that FIDO key in a parking lot and be confident that it can't be used to attack the organization. Obviously, you're going to go then disable that key, but it can't be used without that PIN as well. All right. Next up, security baselines. So there's been baseline security policies in Windows for many, many, many years. Typically, they'd be done through group policy and ADMX templates. For the most part, though, they're not going to be used they haven't been used widely in education environments. That's starting to change. They are becoming significantly easier to deploy because now with tools like Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune, they're smarter. You can see in this screenshot here, this has got MDM baseline security for October 2018, platform Windows 10 and later. The screenshot's a little old, but basically as an operating system moves between feature releases now with Windows, we can automatically update the security baseline because new security features come to the operating system all the time. And this is a way that an organization can take our security baseline and modify it for their own use. It may be too restrictive in an education scenario, for example, but this is a way to say, hey, what does Microsoft recommend for BitLocker or Exploit Guard or RPC or Wi-Fi config, etc. All right, this one's one of my favorites, Defender Antivirus. Anybody old enough here to remember when you used to buy a third-party firewall for Windows? Like that was a thing that you did. I hope, yeah. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. Apparently, you still can. I don't know why you would, but antivirus is kind of becoming like that. Like it's just part of the operating system now. the operating system is protecting itself. There's still a benefit to having a healthy ecosystem of antivirus vendors, right? We are not going to be the only AV product in the market, but our antivirus is not what it used to be back in 2015. It's kind of leading the pack when it comes to third-party AV comparatives now, because of the investments that we've made over the years. I'm going to highlight a handful of things that is just built-in box now with Windows when it comes to security. So here's an example of the different layers of defense that just the baseline antivirus has. Not everything in it is on by default. Some of these configurations you need to enable either as an end user or IT. It's controlled through a policy. So the first one here is client side. That's the only one that's actually done client side, and that's where local machine learning models, AI, ML, heuristics. Yes, there's still signatures in there, but that's 99. A large, vast majority of malware these days has never been seen before, right? Because they just put a bunch of junk at the end of the malicious code, and then everything's it's different. The hash is different for the next machine that it attempts to affect. So these happen in milliseconds, right? So when you download a file in Chrome or Edge or Firefox, and at the bottom or in the top right it says completing antivirus scan, locally that antivirus scan is already completed, right? By the time you've seen that message, and it's waiting for all these cloud ML layers to respond back. Right, so the first one here is metadata-based ML models. So this is on the cloud side. We take this sort of data, right? Process name, file name, hashes, size, code sign, when was it compiled, all that sort of metadata, but not the file itself, and send that to the cloud, because you can tell a lot just by the metadata around that file. And then based on what the machine learning says, hey, is it good or bad? We'll run the file or not. If we're still not sure, now we'll go up to sample-based ML, where if enabled, we can take a copy of that file in near real time here and upload that into our cloud service, and it gets run in multiple bomb chambers in Azure all at the same time. All right, to see what happens. And if the first thing it does is ask if it's in a virtual machine, we're going to shoot the thing and then not let it execute on an endpoint, right? Finally is that detonation. Like I said, it'll actually run. And then big analytics, this can take hours, right? So this is though how we can provide global protection at scale using that intelligent security graph. When we see an outbreak of a new targeted ransomware somewhere in Europe, we're able to near real time update antivirus, because they're constantly talking to the cloud on the other side of the planet, right? So this is the way that Windows machines are protecting themselves these days. As a quick pro tip, the default amount of lock time that Windows waits, or Windows AV, Defender AV waits, is 10 seconds. So it gives the cloud 10 seconds to respond back. If it can't determine it's malicious within 10 seconds, it's going to unlock that file and let it execute. But that can also be controlled. So we can actually give the cloud up to 50 seconds. And we see some enterprises these days having different levels of cloud lock time, depending on the endpoint and its use, right? If it's being used by somebody in finance or HR or somebody, a VIP within the organization, that's fine. We might give it 50 seconds, for the cloud to respond back, because it's going to be help provide better protection. There's also different tolerances as well. So the AV is at a normal configuration by default, but there's also high, plus, and restrictive. So effectively, at what percentage are we going to call something malware, right? Based on these ML models that are being built. So you may get better protection, from the AV. There's a chance of false positives, but I personally have seen one false positive in the last 5 years with Defender antivirus. So you're better off to get the protection in those cases and maybe have to talk to IT to figure out what's happening. Does that mean if a program waits to load its malicious data for 50 seconds, there's less flags raised? That mean if a program waits to load its malicious data for 50, there's less chance for a flag to be raised. So it depends on what the file's doing in the cloud. So hopefully we'd have cloud sample analysis turned on, and we'd look at it to see what's actually happening. There's potentially a higher chance that it's going to be flagged if it's waiting that full 50 seconds. It really depends on the scenario, but effectively you're giving the cloud more time to do analysis on a file. There's an actual flow here as well. We talked about polymorphism, 96%. This slide's actually about a year old. I wouldn't be surprised if this number's higher, but 96% of malware is only ever seen once anymore. So signature based really doesn't work. Oh, this one's good. PUA protection, potentially unwanted applications. Because malware is bad and all, but we certainly don't like Bitcoin mining and advertisement injection, right? As well, right? When I download Adobe Acrobat Reader, I don't need a toolbar or a free VPN or whatever these companies are bundling these days. So that's an option to enable as well. The consumer versions of Windows have that same feature. Any questions on the AV piece? There's a whole long list of, and some of these are fascinating reads. This one, detonating a bad rabbit. Defender antivirus layered machine learning defenses. This is actually talks about, it's old now, but it's a really great read on how these different layers are protected and supports a global security posture. All right. I'm conscious of time here. I'm going to pick up the speed a bit. So, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So this is the EDR. This is the advanced security tool. It's got it's the actor formerly named as Windows Defender ATP, formerly named Microsoft Defender ATP, now just called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It basically takes advantage of all the other security tools built into Windows, but the difference being it takes every event that happens on a machine, right? Process creation, subprocess, reg edit, update, deletion, file creation, modify, everything, URLs you've accessed, all of that, and stores that in the cloud for 6 months, every endpoint. And then we can do, effectively it's a forensic copy of everything that's happened to a machine. You can literally go back in time and do what's called advanced hunting using a language called the Custo query language. If you're interested in learning something useful when it comes to Microsoft security, KQL, there's a great Perl site training for it. KQL is used all over the place for these advanced hunting queries. You want to see every time somebody went to a malicious website that Defender Smart Screen blocked, but they clicked the button that said go anyway, you can write a KQL query that's going to search 6 months of data on every endpoint and show you every machine that pulled that out. Is there an official resource that can help sort all these names and renames of Microsoft products? Yeah, there's a department of renaming things inside Microsoft, and they get a bonus every time they rename something. My website, or my OneNote, tries to do a good job of it. If you just search for Microsoft 365 Defender, that's the kind of suite that I'm talking about here, and it will talk about all those underlying products. Yeah, Docs.Microsoft does a good version. Docs.Microsoft is actually written by humans now, which is fantastic. So I'd encourage you there. Custo query language. Yeah, here actually I'll pull up the KQL site. Yeah, this is the one here. Yeah, KQL. So that when it comes to like Azure Sentinel, for example, this is where you're going to be writing KQL queries. Advanced hunting, GitHub, Defender for Endpoint. Hey, check this out. You want some good examples? There's tons of them on GitHub. Some of them are by our security teams, others are from the community. Hey, you want to look at update files copied to USB drives, execution. There's tons of these queries. And really what you end up doing is through our XDR dashboard, you can go into hunting, and create a custom detection rule that would trip based on one of these queries, right? And take some automated action. Or you can just go hunting yourself and start creating your own KQL queries, and maybe it's part of an investigation. There's a bunch of examples here that you can easily run as well. Okay. So there's a bunch of pillars to Defender for Endpoint. I won't drill into each one, but threat and vulnerability management's the first one, right? So versions of software installed in your machine, operating system updates. What security posture do you have on those endpoints? Is there attack surface reduction rules that can be deployed? All of that stuff falls under TVM. Is a fantastic use, not just on endpoints, but as you can imagine on servers as well. ASR rules, these are a hidden gem that most people don't know about, because I keep hearing people kind of making fun of, oh, you can go, malicious office macros, right? Bane of Windows. Well, why don't you just turn off the ability of Windows or Office from being able to download and run executable content from the internet? Like, that's just a thing you can do. So if I go down here to ASR rules, right, Office files mostly are going to be fine, right? Office files with macros, they might be dangerous, right? Office files with macros that execute content and ones that download and execute content, just enable attack surface reduction rules to turn off that feature, right? Job done. And then you can start hunting against every time that ASR rule was tripped as well, so you can see where that you're actually getting protection. Next generation protection, it's the same antivirus and Defender for Endpoint that's used in by Windows. There's no difference in the AV. It's just the signaling really that's different. The EDR capabilities, right? The detection and response. So we want to be able to get to the point where everything, for the most part, we're automating as much as we can, right? So humans being assisted by machines. And because we have this forensic copy of what happens on every endpoint, we can remediate these issues automatically and effectively roll back changes, right? Threat experts, won't spend much time here, but this is Microsoft security team in these tools. So if I go down here and let's pick out an endpoint, for example, here quickly. Here's a machine. So maybe this machine is going to be part of an investigation. It's a demo environment shared by a lot of people. So, sec. There we go. If necessary, you can consult a threat expert, because not everybody's an expert that has these tools, right? And that will get you in contact with an actual human from Microsoft that can assist in an investigation of a machine. But these are all the other actions you can take, right? Like, I can go hunt against that device with KQL. I can isolate it anywhere on the internet, right? Take it off the network, but it still allow for Teams, Skype, and Exchange communication. Restricting app execution, so that immediately prevents any unsigned code or non-trusted Microsoft code from running, right? So you're going to be able to run your operating system and all your Microsoft apps, but unsigned PowerShell scripts or executables are just not going to work anymore. Force AV, I can initiate live response, so I can have a remote shell to any machine that's in this platform. So you could actually connect onto a computer right beside an attacker if necessary. So really powerful stuff that you can do, over and above regular AV these days. I'll take some of these questions. Are there any plans to make that enabled by default? Which one? The ASR rule for the Office macros? If that was the question, then I've thought of it and I've brought it up to others, but we have to be super conscious around there's actually valid scenarios for some of these things happening, and we don't want to break production environments. So we have to be careful as when we change the defaults on some of these things. But these are easy for IT to deploy. Like that policy is literally a registry key. That's it, and it's enabled. I'm curious what those remaining valid files are in the last category of files with macros that download and execute. Where was that screenshot? Oh yeah, what other good files might do this? I've seen some where there's finance departments or some custom built legacy software that's using crazy macros. It's a thing, but yeah, for the most part, at least in education, I tell education organizations to enable this and wait for somebody to scream, because it's probably not going to affect anybody in your school. If it does, then you carve out just for them, and it's at least then good to know that that person is doing this weird thing, with Office documents. Maybe this was the baseline documentation, but other docs for device / system hardening. Yeah, if you want. In my OneNote, there will be, recommend M365 golden configuration recommendations. There's a PAW documentation, securing privileged access. There's multiple, depends on what you're trying to accomplish when you say hardening. So we have about 5 different levels of device hardening, depending on its scenario. The first 3 are really information worker. The last 2, 4, and 5 are really about privileged access scenarios. But yeah, there's definitely documentation and guidance on those. Yeah, the consultant expert is not complimentary. Yeah, we have to hire humans to do that. Yeah, it's normally schools would be using a partner for that sort of thing rather than Microsoft first party support, but some schools opt to use the first party. It also comes with targeted attack notifications too, so that our hunters are able to hunt against anonymized customer data. So you don't see usernames, we don't see device names, all that stuff is gone, and the organization would opt in and be able to, our hunters hunt against that vast amount of data, and then you would actually get a specific targeted attack notification in your security dashboard. All right, let me get back to where we were here. Yeah, platform coverage. We cover basically everything now. This is a fantastic integration map. This is just for Defender for endpoints. One of our security partners, if you're interested, Managed Sentinel. They were acquired by a company called Blue Voyant not too long ago. Does these really great Visio diagrams about how all this stuff interconnects, because that's part of the beauty of the Microsoft Security Suite is it's engineered together, so you don't have to connect these separate security products and do orchestration between them. We can do that for you. All right, so that's Defender for Endpoint, the EDR piece. Let's just talk about some of the other subcomponents here. We got about 15 minutes. Windows Defender application control. If anybody's familiar with App Locker, right, where it's effectively an allow list, right? We're changing, from just letting anything execute, with some, some antivirus and other pieces in place, to only stuff that we trust can execute. which is longer term probably what most normal people are going to be doing. When it comes, most normal people don't need a general purpose computer, right? They don't, and to be able to execute any code they want. There's certainly needs for that, but my mom doesn't need that capability. So the next generation of app locker is called Windows Defender Application Control. And it allows us to have a cloud-powered allow list of executable content. So you're not having to build that yourself. Our intelligent security graph can drive that. And if we haven't seen an executable before, or that hash of the file or whatever it is, we're not going to let it run until it develops a level of trust within the globe, right? So there's a chance you can run into some issues, right? You might go to vlc.com or .org and download the latest VLC installer, and they literally just uploaded it a millisecond ago, and you're the first one on the planet to download it. It's not going to have any trust yet, unless there's using the same code signing certificate, or there's ways that you can maintain that trust. But this is a really great tool to help harden Windows. What's neat here is you can see Windows script host, MSIs, PowerShells actually all also operate in constrained language mode when you're using Defender Application Control. So it'll harden the scripting languages for the operating system as well. Yeah, my org's implementing whitelisting in all domains now. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. But enterprises need to protect themselves these days. All right. This one, by the way, you just enable this in in the screenshot here. You can see it's in enforced mode, but there's an audit mode. And guess how you can search for issues that might happen going into production? Kusto query language. Show me all the Defender application control blocks that would have happened. And then I can then develop your list of approved applications over time. Defender application guard. I don't have this enabled on my system, otherwise I would demo it for you. But application guard is using a Windows container to run an application. So to the end user, it looks like they're just running the app, right? So when I go to launch, the new Edge, and I have application guard installed, I can say new application guard window. And under the hood, a little tiny container, about 250 megs worth of RAM, spins up and runs that application guard window. You will see a little bit of a difference in Edge in that it'll have like an application guard icon, but anything that happens in that browser can't affect the underlying operating system. And when you close that browser, we toss that container. And when you reopen a new one, it's starting fresh again. But there's overhead to running these things, right? If you want to kick the tires, Windows Sandbox is very similar. If you haven't played with Windows Sandbox, it's a feature you can install in Windows. It's just loading up on my other screen here, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Right, here's my Windows Sandbox. Boom. So just like that, that was what? I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. I now have a sandbox for me that's a bomb chamber. So we've seen some, you want to run a potentially piece of malicious code and see what happens. Cool. You want a script that orchestrates the configuration of sandbox as it boots every time. Awesome. We can do that too. Really cool piece of tech. But this is the same sort of thing that's backing application guard. Literally happened too fast for me to follow what he did. Yeah, so install Windows Sandbox, the feature, and it'll give you this little container that you can run within Windows. So that's a bomb chamber effectively. And then when you close it, yeah, it's going to toss everything. So gone. Adobe Reader and Acrobat Reader support Defender Application Guard as well. Just out of the box. Same thing with Office, available in WinPro. Yeah, Yeah, some of this stuff that I'm talking about, I haven't really been calling out what edition of Windows, but some features are not home capable. All right, credential guard. We all know Mimikatz. This is how you protect, credentials from Mimikatz. Is you use virtualization tech from Hyper-V to securely store that, separately. So Mimikatz won't be able to take credentials and replay them, when credential guard is enabled. Some of these features, by the way, require hardware protections. Trusted platform module, for example, you might have noticed Windows 11 is requiring TPM 2.0. There's good reasons from a security perspective that we want to be able to standardize. We talked about changing defaults from a security perspective earlier. We can't change defaults if all the hardware for the operating system doesn't have a trusted hardware module. So that's why we're pushing for some of these changes. Defender Exploit Guard is a collection of tools. So we talked about attack surface reduction and office file protection, but there's a list of supported ASR rules, right? That are helpful. Hey, flag credential stealing from Windows Local Security Authority subsystem. Probably want that, right? Office apps injecting into other processes, no exceptions. Probably want that one too, right? There's many of these are a good thing to deploy. Controlled folder access, right? This is the ransomware protection tool built in, right? So not just your profile locations, but even network locations can be defined as controlled folders. So any non-trusted code, right, defined by the intelligent security graph or you, can no longer have read-write access to those locations. Smart screen, so this is built in to Windows. This is our URL safe protection. By the way, it operates at the network stack layer, so regardless if you're using Opera or Firefox or Chrome, you're getting the same protections. You won't necessarily see this nice red screen. You can get extensions for the other browsers for that. But if we see it at the network layer, we'll actually just drop the traffic. So you'll get an error in browsers other than Edge if you don't have the extension. You don't need to worry much about control flow guard. System guard. This is again another reason we're pushing for TPMs. We need to be able to ensure, there's the operating system secure from boot, rooted in hardware, right? So protecting the operating system from time of power on through UEFI, all the way to login in the desktop. We talked about firewalls already, just built into Windows these days, and then finally BitLocker. So yet again, another reason that we need TPM capabilities, just built into the operating system these days. There's no need for third-party encryption really anymore. There's maybe some edge case scenarios for the most part. It's pretty straightforward to encrypt devices, and it's come a long way. So here's a good example. I'll blow this one up a little bit, right? As an IT organization now, you can define a policy in tools like Intune, target that policy to a device, that device silently encrypts, and then in the background, its keys are then sent to Azure Active Directory for escrow, and people can self-serve recovery keys directly from there. And there's a whole compliance view for IT in the back end and self-service flow for end users. So pretty powerful stuff. So that's it on the Windows piece, and we only have 6 minutes for other stuff. But is there any questions on the Windows? I haven't been looking at the chat. Is Browser Application Guard and Sandbox available to consumers? I think I'm not sure. I only tend to talk about enterprise scenarios. You might be able to get Sandbox. I think it's Pro. Application Guard might be an enterprise feature. I'm not sure. Or education and enterprise. Cool. So for the last few minutes, if you want to talk Azure AD, I'm more than happy to. Maybe just as a strategic kind of thing instead of drilling into each one. So let me do this. We'll make a long story short. So Azure AD is the control plane of the future. Identity is the control plane, effectively, right? That's how you secure resources now. Network is no longer a security boundary because the internet's the network. You need to secure all resources like they're on the internet. That's how we have to treat everything now, right? And for the most part, so that means actually taking some things off the internet, right? And gating them behind identity. So behind Azure AD, for example. Hopefully we all know what zero trust is, right? We won't drive in there. Talk to identity as control plane. Assume every resource is open on the internet. And then always verify. Never trust. So we want all the security signals that we can take. And for us, managed by the organization, is it compliant in tools like Intune? Is it healthy from Defender endpoint perspective? Does it have a certificate deployed on the machine? What group is the device in? Is the device in the specific group? What place on the planet is it coming from? What ISP is it connecting from? Has the ISP connected to that organization before? Is it on CorpNet, right? Is it on network on campus or not? Right? Is it a hybrid Azure AD joined machine? Is it Azure AD joined? Is it a browser application that they're using? What browser is it? Or is it a client app? Right? Is it a Office, Outlook client, or is it Apple's built-in mail app, or is it some no-name Android mail application? And then what authentication protocol is it using? Legacy auth? Is it using modern auth? All of these things can be built into a conditional access policy. And based on those conditions, we can then also inject machine learning and our intelligent security graph data to determine session and user risk, and then have controls come out the other side of that. Right? So that control could be, come on in, we're good. Like no additional friction, right? Seamless SSO right on in. The control could be outright block, where it literally says you can't get to here from where you are. Contact IT. You're coming from Tor network, that's the message you're going to see, because 99.99% of traffic coming from Tor is malicious. So that stuff's just going to get blocked. The risk level's too high, right? Limited access. Maybe I know it's you. I don't trust the device you're coming on. I'm not going to allow you to print or download content onto that machine, right? Or maybe if I download content, I'll encrypt it on the fly. Maybe I can require MFA, right? I need you to proof up your level of assurance. Maybe I know your password's been compromised, because that 40 terabytes at the top here from the intelligent security graph that we're feeding in, we're getting leaked credential reports constantly, right? That says, hey, we found your plain text. We run it through the same list of hashes or the same hashing algorithm that we'd use to store passwords in Azure AD itself. And if the hashes match, the plain text matches, and the next time you sign in, we'll force you through an SSPR flow. And then finally down here, block legacy auth. So there's way more controls than what's up here, but this is the sort of zero trust identity security posture organizations are starting to take these days. Cool, I think I've got like 30 seconds left. So hopefully that was useful to everybody. I'm gonna type my OneNote into chat. Yeah, and feel free to kick around. That's, like I said, how I organize my brain. Love the OneNote based presentation. How do I get more of this? Would love to keep learning about the MS security stack this summer. The best way that you can learn, Kusto is one. Learn.microsoft.com is where we are putting all of our learning content these days, and this is the official like certification path stuff on our tools. Microsoft 365 is where you'll probably want to go if you want to do the security stack. There's going to be everything on this collab platform, but look, defend against threats with Microsoft 365. 3 hours 37 minutes. This will walk you through all of that. I'd encourage you to sign in with an identity so that it can track all that. You get your points, levels, and certs and stuff. Other than that, the really great ak.ms/security webinars is a great one. So this is all of the webinars that our product groups do in engineering, categorized by product. You can watch them, download the decks, so you can make your own content. There's way more material than anybody's ever going to watch on here, but it's really cool to be able to drill in and see, hey, I want to have what's identity security posture assessments. Cool, Defender for Identity. This is probably tied into a thing that used to be called third party Bloodhound, which basically was an on-prem AD assessment tool for red teams that would look at all of the policy security groups and what's the shortest path to domain dominance. They, funny enough, just released an enterprise version of this a few days ago, but Defender for Identities actually does an enterprise continuous evaluation of those same sort of things. So that's what that session would specifically drill down into. So yeah, you can. I spend a lot of time watching these videos. Cool. Any other questions before we wrap? All right, I'll stop my screen share here.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Happy to do it. Yeah, it's fun.
Thank you. I know it's been a lot to fit into like 45 minutes an hour. There's like a ton of stuff, but I hope you sort of scratch the surface of the ice.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping to do, was just once you know even this stuff sort of exists, you can then go drill deeper yourself. And yeah, there's just on Windows alone, you could spend a whole day talking about some of these features and implementation and capabilities. So yeah, happy to join you guys tonight. So
Yeah, I definitely hope our audience was as engaging for you as you were for us.
Yep, sounds good.
And thanks again for making those documents available.
No problem, folks.
Hey, I just have a quick question.
Yep.
I was just wondering, you talked about like Windows Defender Antivirus or whatever it's called now. But
Yep.
do you think there's any benefit to having like a third-party antivirus that might improve like detection rates or I don't know, maybe other benefits?
Yeah, so there's a benefit to having a healthy antivirus ecosystem. Do I think it's worth spending? I'd say your money could be better spent on other places, personally. But every computer I run in my house, most enterprise scenarios, at least 50% of enterprise machines just run Defender antivirus now. But you're never going to hear a Microsoft person say that there's no need for a third-party AV, because there's reasons that there shouldn't be just one security antivirus player, right? A healthy ecosystem is important, but I don't see a need for it personally. So the example that I use there on firewalls, it's kind of like the same thing to me. It's like there's still a third-party firewall ecosystem. You can buy them, but
You don't really need it.
Do you need it anymore? The money, where the money is being spent now, is not on antivirus. In enterprise scenarios, it's being spent on EDRs, right? Which is, there's a healthy, yes, we have one of the largest, most capable EDR platforms, but there's SentinelOne and CrowdStrike, and there's a lot of players in that area. That's where the money should be spent when it comes to enterprise security. And then Defender antivirus can be used with those other EDRs, or we can have a third-party EDR using Defender for Endpoint, and Defender antivirus stands back and lets that AV take the front. But it's yeah. Any other questions?
Is that a server in the background there, I see, or a server rack?
Yeah, that's it's actually an audio rack that is a little short, but the mounting holes are all the same.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah, well, it used to be a lot more full, but I don't need servers at the house now. Everything just runs in the cloud, so it's really just got my NAS and an Xbox and all my network gear and all that. Yeah, it used to have a 48 core, 256 gig of RAM monster, virtualization box, but my office turned into a furnace at that point, and the electricity bill wasn't too good.
Probably pretty loud too.
Yeah, yeah. I just actually got rid of it. It was an Intel SR16 SR 1580 MV. It was like dual quad core sort. They just sound like jet engines. So
Especially when
yeah.
you're starting up too, eh?
Yeah. So I'll stick with a little NAS for now, and that's good enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
If anyone also has any questions or wants to hop on mic to ask, feel free.
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Cool.
All right. I'm signing off then, folks. Have yourself a great evening.
Great. Have a good night, David.
All
Thanks.
right.
You too.
Have a
Bye.
good night. Take care.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. So if anybody wants to stick around for games, maybe we can do that at around 9:30. Go grab maybe dinner or something. But yeah, thanks, Christian, for sending us the survey. Please also fill out the survey just to give us feedback on what we're doing right, what we can improve on. Just let us know how we're doing.
Bet.